Welcome to today's Triple Z. The Triple Z podcast is a daily program that you can use to help you fall asleep each night. Just turn down the volume, lay back, relax, and enjoy as you fall asleep. We saw that our podcast was topping the charts in Malaysia, so we are going to read their Wikipedia entry. Let's learn about this interesting country in the dullest way possible. If you enjoy our program, please be sure to write us a review on your podcast platform and share us with a friend. You both might sleep just a little better at night. Our website is Triple Z, that's 3zs.media. You can also like and share our content on Facebook or our Instagram account ZZZ Media Podcast. Music for today's episode was provided by the Sleep channel on Spotify. Music for today's episode was provided by the Sleep channel on Spotify and Apple Music. Malaysia is a country in Southeast Asia. The federal constitutional monarchy consists of 13 states and 3 federal territories separated by the South China Sea into 2 regions, Peninsular Malaysia and Borneo's East Malaysia. Peninsular Malaysia shares a land and maritime border with Thailand and maritime borders with Singapore, Vietnam, and Indonesia. East Malaysia shares land and maritime borders with Brunei and Indonesia, as well as a maritime border with the Philippines and Vietnam. Kuala Lumpur is the national capital, the country's largest city, and the seat of the legislative branch of the federal government. Putrajaya is the administrative center, which represents the seat of both the executive branch, the cabinet, federal ministries, and federal agencies, and the judicial branch of the federal government. With a population of over 33 million, the country is the world's 43rd most populous country. Malaysia is tropical and is one of 17 megadiverse countries. It is home to numerous endemic species. Tanjung Piai in the Malaysian state of Johor is the southernmost point of continental Eurasia. The country has its origins in the Malay kingdoms, which, from the 18th century on, became subject to the British Empire, along with the British Straits Settlements Protectorate. During World War II, British Malaya, along with other nearby British and American colonies, was occupied by the Empire of Japan. Following 3 years of occupation, Peninsular Malaysia was unified as the Malayan Union in 1946 and then restructured as the Federation of Malaya in 1948. The country achieved independence on August 31, 1957. On September 16, 1963, independent Malaya united with the then British Crown colonies of North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore to become Malaysia. In August 1965, Singapore was expelled from the Federation and became a separate, independent country. The country is multi-ethnic and multicultural, which has a significant effect on its politics. About half the population is ethnically Malay, with minorities of Chinese, Indians, and indigenous peoples. The official language is Malaysian Malay, a standard form of the Malay language. English remains an active second language. While recognizing Islam as the official religion, the Constitution grants freedom of religion to non-Muslims. The government is modeled on the Westminster parliamentary system, and the legal system is based on common law. The head of state is an elected monarch, chosen from among the 9 state sultans every 5 years. The head of government is the prime minister. After independence, the gross domestic product, GDP, grew at an average rate of 6.5% per year for almost 50 years. The country's economy has traditionally been driven by its natural resources, but it is expanding into commerce, tourism, and medical tourism. The country has a newly industrialized market economy, ranked 5th largest in Southeast Asia and 36th largest in the world. The country is a founding member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, the East Asia Summit, EAS, and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, and a member of the Non-Aligned Movement, NAM, the Commonwealth, and the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC. The name Malaysia is a combination of the word Malays and the Latin Greek suffix ia/alpha, which can be translated as land of the Malays. The origin of the word Malayu is subject to various theories. It may derive from the Sanskrit Himalaya, referring to areas high in the mountains, or Malayapura, meaning mountain town. Another similar theory claims its origin lies in the Tamil words Malai and Yuar, meaning mountain and city, land, respectively. Another suggestion is that it derives from the Pamalayu campaign. A final suggestion is that it comes from a Javanese word meaning to run, from which a river, the Sungai Malayu River, was named due to its strong current. Similar sounding variants have also appeared in accounts older than the 11th century as toponyms for areas in Sumatra or referring to a larger region around the Strait of Malacca. The Sanskrit text Vayu Purana, thought to have been in existence since the first millennium CE, mentioned a land named Malayadvipa, which was identified by certain scholars as the modern Malay Peninsula. Other notable accounts are by the 2nd century Ptolemy's Geographia that used the name Malayu-Kulon for the west coast of Golden Chersonese, and the 7th century Ijing's account of Malayu. At some point, the Malaya kingdom took its name from the Sungai Malayu. Malayu then became associated with Srivijaya and remained associated with various parts of Sumatra, especially Palembang, where the founder of the Malacca Sultanate is thought to have come from. It is only thought to have developed into an ethnonym as Malacca became a regional power in the 15th century. Islamization established an ethno-religious identity in Malacca, with the term Malayu beginning to appear as interchangeable with Moluccans. It may have specifically referred to local Malay speakers thought loyal to the Malaccan Sultan. The initial Portuguese use of Malayos reflected this, referring only to the ruling people of Malacca. The prominence of traders from Malacca led Malayu to be associated with Muslim traders, and from there became associated with the wider cultural and linguistic group. Malacca and later Johor claimed they were the center of Malay culture, a position supported by the British, which led to the term Malay becoming more usually linked to the Malay Peninsula rather than Sumatra. Before the onset of European colonization, the Malay Peninsula was known natively as Tanah Malayu, Malay land. Under a racial classification created by a German scholar Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, the natives of maritime Southeast Asia were grouped into a single category, the Malay race. Following the expedition of French navigator Jules Dumont d'Urville to Oceania in 1826, he later proposed the terms of Malaysia, Micronesia, and Melanesia to the Société de Géographie in 1831, distinguishing these Pacific cultures and island groups from the existing term Polynesia. Dumont d'Urville described Malaysia as an area commonly known as the East Indies. In 1850, the English ethnologist George Samuel Windsor Earle, writing in the Journal of the Indian Archipelago in Eastern Asia, proposed naming the islands of Southeast Asia as Melanesia or Indonesia, favoring the former. The name Malaysia gained some use to label what is now the Malay archipelago. In modern terminology, Malay remains the name of an ethno-religious group of Austronesian people predominantly inhabiting the Malay Peninsula and portions of the adjacent islands of Southeast Asia, including the east coast of Sumatra, the coast of Borneo, and smaller islands that lie between these areas. The state that gained independence from the United Kingdom in 1957 took the name the Federation of Malaya, chosen in preference to other potential names such as Lankasuka, after the historic kingdom located at the upper section of the Malay Peninsula in the first millennium CE. The name Malaysia was adopted in 1963 when the existing states of the Federation of Malaya, plus Singapore, North Borneo, and Sarawak formed a new federation. One theory posits the name was chosen so that SI represented the inclusion of Singapore, North Borneo, and Sarawak to Malaya in 1963. Politicians in the Philippines contemplated renaming their state Malaysia before the modern country took the name. Evidence of modern human habitation in Malaysia dates back 40,000 years. In the Malay Peninsula, the first inhabitants are thought to be Negritos. Areas of Malaysia participated in the Maritime Jade Road between 2000 BC to 1000 AD. Traders and settlers from India and China arrived as early as the 1st century AD, establishing trading ports and coastal towns in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Their presence resulted in strong Indian and Chinese influences on the local cultures, and the people of the Malay Peninsula adopted the religions of Hinduism and Buddhism. Sanskrit inscriptions appear as early as the 4th or 5th century. The kingdom of Lankasuka arose around the 2nd century in the northern area of the Malay Peninsula, lasting until about the 15th century. Between the 7th and 13th centuries, much of the southern Malay Peninsula was part of the maritime Srivijayan Empire. By the 13th and the 14th century, the Majapahit Empire had successfully wrested control over most of the peninsula and the Malay archipelago from Srivijaya. In the early 15th century, Parmesvara, a runaway king of the former kingdom of Singapura linked to the old Srivijayan court, founded the Malacca Sultanate. The spread of Islam increased following Parmesvara's conversion to that religion. Malacca was an important commercial center during this time, attracting trade from around the region. In 1511, Malacca was conquered by Portugal, after which it was taken by the Dutch in 1641. In 1786, the British Empire established a presence in Malaya when the Sultan of Kedah leased Penang Island to the British East India Company. The British obtained the town of Singapore in 1819 and in 1824 took control of Malacca following the Anglo-Dutch Treaty. By 1826, the British directly controlled Penang, Malacca, Singapore, and the island of Labuan, which they established as the crown colony of the Straits Settlements. By the 20th century, the states of Pahang, Selangor, Perak, and Negeri Sembilan, known together as the Federated Malay States, had British residents appointed to advise the Malay rulers, to whom the rulers were bound to defer by treaty. The remaining 5 states on the peninsula, known as the Unfederated Malay States, while not directly under British rule, also accepted British advisors around the turn of the 20th century. Development on the peninsula and Borneo were generally separate until the 19th century. Under British rule, the immigration of Chinese and Indians to serve as laborers was encouraged. The area that is now Sabah came under British control as North Borneo when both the Sultan of Brunei and the Sultan of Sulu transferred their respective territorial rights of ownership between 1877 and 1878. In 1842, Sarawak was ceded by the Sultan of Brunei to James Brooke, whose successors ruled as the White Rajas over an independent kingdom until 1946, when it became a crown colony. In the Second World War, the Japanese army invaded and occupied Malaya, North Borneo, Sarawak, and Singapore for over 3 years. During this time, ethnic tensions were raised and nationalism grew. Popular support for independence increased after Malaya was reconquered by Allied forces. post-war British plans to unite the administration of Malaya under a single crown colony called the Malayan Union met with strong opposition from the Malays, who opposed the weakening of the Malay rulers and the granting of citizenship to the ethnic Chinese. The Malayan Union, established in 1946 and consisting of all the British possessions in the Malay Peninsula with the exception of Singapore, was quickly dissolved and replaced on February 1, 1948 by the Federation of Malaya, which restored the autonomy of the rulers of the Malay states under British protection. During this time, the mostly ethnically Chinese rebels under the leadership of the Malayan Communist Party launched guerrilla operations designed to force the British out of Malaya. The Malayan Emergency, 1948 to 1960, involved a long anti-insurgency campaign by Commonwealth troops in Malaya. On August 31, 1957, Malaya became an independent member of the Commonwealth of Nations. Subsequently, a comprehensive plan was devised to unite Malaya with the Crown colonies of North Borneo, known as Sabah, upon joining Sarawak and Singapore. The envisioned federation was originally intended to take place on August 31, 1963, to coincide with the commemoration of Malayan independence. However, due to the necessity of conducting a survey on the level of support for the Federation in Sabah and Sarawak by the United Nations, as requested by opponents of the Federation such as Indonesia's Sukarno and the Sarawak United People's Party, the date of the Federation was postponed until September 16, 1963. This delay allowed sufficient time for the completion of the aforementioned survey. The Federation brought heightened tensions, including a conflict with Indonesia as well as continual conflicts against the Communists in Borneo and the Malayan Peninsula, which escalated to the Sarawak Communist insurgency and Second Malayan Emergency, together with several other issues such as the cross-border attacks into Sabah by Moro pirates from the southern islands of the Philippines, Singapore being expelled from the Federation in 1965, and racial strife. This strife culminated in the May 13th race riots in 1969. After the riots, the controversial new economic policy was launched by Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak, trying to increase the share of the economy held by the Bumiputera. Under Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, there was a period of rapid economic growth and urbanization beginning in the 1980s. The economy shifted from being agriculturally based to one based on manufacturing and industry. Numerous mega projects were completed, such as the Petronas Towers, the North-South Expressway, the Multimedia Super Corridor, and the new federal administrative capital at Putrajaya. In the late 1990s, the Asian financial crisis impacted the country, nearly causing their currency, stock, and property markets to crash. However, they later recovered. The 1MDB scandal was a major global corruption scandal that implicated then Prime Minister Najib Razak in 2015. The scandal contributed to the first change in the ruling political party since independence in the 2018 general election. In the 2020s, the country was gripped by a political crisis that coincided with health and economic crises caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. This was then followed by an earlier general election in November 2022, which resulted in the first hung parliament in the nation's history. On November 24, 2022, Anwar Ibrahim was sworn in as the 10th Prime Minister of Malaysia, leading a grand coalition government. Malaysia is a federal constitutional elective monarchy, the only federal country in Southeast Asia. The system of government is closely modeled on the Westminster parliamentary system, a legacy of British rule. The head of state is the king, whose official title is the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. The king is elected to a 5-year term by and from among the 9 hereditary rulers of the Malay states. The other 4 states, which have titular governors, do not participate in this election. By informal agreement, the position is rotated among the 9 and has been held by Abdullah Pahang since January 31, 2019. The king's role has been largely ceremonial since changes to the constitution in 1994, picking ministers and members of the upper house. Legislative power is divided between federal and state legislatures. The bicameral federal parliament consists of the lower house, the House of Representatives, and the upper house, the Senate. The 222-member House of Representatives is elected for a maximum term of 5 years from single-member constituencies. All 70 senators sit for 3-year terms, 26 are elected by the 13 state assemblies, and the remaining 44 are appointed by the king upon the prime minister's recommendation. The parliament follows a multi-party system and the government is elected through a first-past-the-post system. Parliamentary elections are held at least once every 5 years, the most recent of which took place in May 2018. Before 2018, registered voters aged 21 and above could vote for the members of the House of Representatives and, in most of the states, for the state legislative chamber. Voting is not mandatory. In July 2019, a bill to lower the voting age to 18 years old was officially passed. Executive power is vested in the cabinet, led by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister must be a member of the House of Representatives, who, in the opinion of His Majesty the King, commands the support of a majority of members. The cabinet is chosen from members of both houses of Parliament. The Prime Minister is both the head of cabinet and the head of government. As a result of the 2018 general election, Malaysia was governed by the Pakatan Harapan (PH) political alliance, although Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad resigned amid a political crisis in 2020. In March 2020, the Perikatan Nasional (PN) coalition formed under Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin before Muhyiddin lost majority support and was replaced by Deputy Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaakob, a veteran politician from the United Malays National Organization (UMNO), in August 2021. As a result of the 2022 Malaysian general election, a hung parliament was elected. Anwar Ibrahim of the PH coalition was appointed as the new Prime Minister to lead the coalition government of PH, Barisan Nasional, Gabungan Part 1 Sarawak, Gabungan Rakyat Sabah, and several other political parties and independents. Meanwhile, PN, the only political coalition not in the coalition government, became the opposition. Malaysia's legal system is based on common law. Although the judiciary is theoretically independent, its independence has been called into question and the appointment of judges lacks accountability and transparency. The highest court in the judicial system is the Federal Court, followed by the Court of Appeal and 2 high courts, one for Peninsular Malaysia and one for East Malaysia. Malaysia also has a special court to hear cases brought by or against royalty. Race is a significant force in politics. Affirmative actions such as the new economic policy and the national development policy which superseded it were implemented to advance the standing of the Bumiputera, consisting of Malays and the indigenous tribes who are considered the original inhabitants of Malaysia, over non-Bumiputeras such as Malaysian Chinese and Malaysian Indians. These policies provide preferential treatment to Bumiputera in employment, education, scholarships, business, and access to cheaper housing and assisted savings. However, it has generated greater interethnic resentment. There is ongoing debate over whether the laws and society of Malaysia should reflect Islamism or secularism. Islamic criminal laws passed by the Pan-Malaysian Islamic Party with the support of UMNO state assemblymen in the State Legislative Assembly of Kelantan have been blocked by the federal government on the basis that criminal laws are the responsibility of the federal government. After UMNO lost power at the 2018 Malaysian general election, Malaysia's ranking increased by 9 places in the 2019 Democracy Index to 43rd compared to the previous year and is classified as a flawed democracy. Malaysia's ranking in the 2020 Press Freedom Index increased by 22 places to 101st compared to the previous year, making it one of 2 countries in Southeast Asia without a difficult situation or very serious situation with regards to press freedom. However, it fell 18 places the following year due to the policies of the PN government. Malaysia is marked at 48th and 62nd place according to the 2021 Corruption Perceptions Index, indicating above average levels of corruption. Freedom House noted Malaysia as partly free in its 2018 survey. A lawsuit filed by the Department of Justice alleged that at least $3.5 billion involving former Prime Minister Najib Razak had been stolen from Malaysia's 1MDB state-owned fund, known as the One Malaysia Development Berhad scandal. Malaysia is a federation of 13 states and 3 federal territories. These are divided between 2 regions, with 11 states and 2 federal territories on peninsular Malaysia and the other 2 states and 1 federal territory in East Malaysia. Each state is divided into districts, which are then divided into mukim. In Sabah and Sarawak districts are grouped into divisions. Governance of the states is divided between the federal and the state governments, with different powers reserved for each, and the federal government has direct administration of the federal territories. Each state has a unicameral state legislative assembly whose members are elected from single-member constituencies. State governments are led by chief ministers, who are state assembly members from the majority party in the assembly. In each of the states with a hereditary ruler, the chief minister is normally required to be a Malay, appointed by the ruler upon the recommendation of the prime minister. Except for state elections in Sarawak, by convention state elections are held concurrently with the federal election. Lower-level administration is carried out by local authorities, which includes city councils, district councils, and municipal councils, although autonomous statutory bodies can be created by the federal and state governments to deal with certain tasks. The federal constitution puts local authorities outside of the federal territories under the exclusive jurisdictions of the state government, although in practice the federal government has intervened in the affairs of state-local governments. There are 154 local authorities, consisting of 14 city councils, 38 municipal councils, and 97 district councils. The 13 states are based on historical Malay kingdoms, and 9 of the 11 peninsular states, known as the Malay states, retain their royal families. The king is elected by and from the 9 rulers to serve a 5-year term. This king appoints governors serving a 4-year term for the states without monarchies after consultations with the chief minister of that state. Each state has its own written constitution. Sabah and Sarawak have considerably more autonomy than the other states, most notably having separate immigration policies and controls, and a unique residency status. Federal intervention in state affairs, lack of development, and disputes over oil royalties have occasionally led to statements about secession from leaders in several states such as Penang, Johor, Kelantan, Sabah, and Sarawak, although these have not been followed up and no serious independence movements exist. States A list of 13 states and each state capital, in parentheses. Federal territories: Federal Territory of Kuala Lumpur, Federal Territory of Labuan, Federal Territory of Putrajaya. A founding member of ASEAN and OIC, the country participates in many international organizations such as the United Nations, UN, APEC, the DE Organization for Economic Cooperation, and NAM. It has chaired ASEAN, OIC, and NAM in the past. A former British colony, it is also a member of the Commonwealth. Kuala Lumpur was the site of the first EAS in 2005. Malaysia's foreign policy is officially based on the principle of neutrality and maintaining peaceful relations with all countries, regardless of their political system. The government attaches a high priority to the security and stability of Southeast Asia and seeks to further develop relations with other countries in the region. Historically, the government has tried to portray Malaysia as a progressive Islamic nation while strengthening relations with other Islamic states. A strong tenet of Malaysia's policy is national sovereignty and the right of a country to control its domestic affairs. Malaysia signed the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. The Spratly Islands are disputed by many states in the area, and a large portion of the South China Sea is claimed by China. Unlike its neighbors of Vietnam and the Philippines, Malaysia historically avoided conflicts with China. However, after the encroachment of Chinese ships in Malaysian territorial waters and breach of airspace by their military aircraft, Malaysia has become active in condemning China. Brunei and Malaysia in 2009 announced an end to claims of each other's land and committed to resolve issues related to their maritime borders. The Philippines has a dormant claim to the eastern part of Sabah. Singapore's land reclamation has caused tensions, and minor maritime and land border disputes exist with Indonesia. The Malaysian Armed Forces have three branches: the Malaysian Army, Royal Malaysian Navy, and the Royal Malaysian Air Force. There is no conscription, and the required age for voluntary military service is 18. The military uses 1.5% of the country's GDP and employs 1.23% of Malaysia's manpower. Malaysian peacekeeping forces have contributed to many UN peacekeeping missions, such as in Congo, Iran, Iraq, Namibia, Cambodia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Somalia, Kosovo, East Timor, and Lebanon. The Five Power Defense Arrangements is a regional security initiative which has been in place for almost 40 years. It involves joint military exercises held among Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. Joint exercises and war games have also been held with Brunei, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, and the United States. Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam have agreed to host joint security force exercises to secure their maritime border and tackle issues such as illegal immigration, piracy, and smuggling. Previously, there were fears that extremist militant activities in the Muslim areas of the southern Philippines and southern Thailand would spill over into Malaysia. Because of this, Malaysia began to increase its border security. Homosexuality is illegal in Malaysia, and authorities have imposed punishments such as caning and imprisonment. Human trafficking and sex trafficking in Malaysia are significant problems. There have also been cases of vigilante executions and beatings against LGBT individuals in Malaysia. The illegality of homosexuality in Malaysia has also been the forefront of Anwar Ibrahim's sodomy trials, which Anwar has called politically motivated, a characterization supported by the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, along with Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch. The death penalty is in use for serious crimes such as murder, terrorism, drug trafficking, and kidnapping, but in June 2022, Malaysian Law Minister Wan Junaid pledged to abolish capital punishment and replace it with other punishments at the discretion of the court. In July 2023, the 1975 lead singer Matty Healy slammed the country's anti-LGBTQ laws by kissing a bandmate on stage at a music festival in Kuala Lumpur, causing the Ministry of Communications and Digital to cancel the 3-day event. Malaysia is the 66th largest country by total land area, with a total area of 330,803 square kilometers, 127,724 square miles. Prior to 2010, its total area was thought to be 329,847 square kilometers, 127,355 square miles. However, when the country's statistics were measured in 2010, a new calculation method was used. Unlike previous calculations, this one included the area from the coast to the low water line, revealing the country to be 956 square kilometers, 369 square miles larger in total area than originally thought. It has land borders with Thailand in West Malaysia and Indonesia and Brunei in East Malaysia. It is linked to Singapore by a narrow causeway and a bridge. The country also has maritime boundaries with Vietnam and the Philippines. The land borders are defined in large part by geological features such as the Perlis River, the Galak River, and the Pagulayan Canal, while some of the maritime boundaries are the subject of ongoing contention. Brunei forms what is almost an enclave in Malaysia, with the state of Sarawak dividing it into two parts. Malaysia is the only country with territory on both the Asian mainland and the Malay archipelago. The Strait of Malacca, lying between Sumatra and peninsular Malaysia, is one of the most important thoroughfares in global commerce, carrying 40% of the world's trade. The two parts of Malaysia, separated from each other by the South China Sea, share a largely similar landscape in that both Peninsular and East Malaysia feature coastal plains rising to hills and mountains. Peninsular Malaysia, containing 40% of Malaysia's land area, extends 740 kilometers, 460 miles from north to south, and its maximum width is 322 kilometers, 200 miles. It is divided between its east and west coasts by the Titiwangsa Mountains, rising to a peak elevation of 2,183 meters, 7,162 feet, at Mount Korbu, part of a series of mountain ranges running down the center of the peninsula. These mountains are heavily forested and mainly composed of granite and other igneous rocks. Much of it has been eroded, creating a karst landscape. The range is the origin of some of peninsular Malaysia's river systems. The coastal plains surrounding the peninsula reach a maximum width of 50 kilometers, 31 miles, and the peninsula's coastline is nearly 1,931 kilometers, 1,200 miles long, although harbors are only available on the western side. East Malaysia, on the island of Borneo, has a coastline of 2,607 kilometers, 1,620 miles. It is divided between coastal regions, hills and valleys, and a mountainous interior. The Crocker Range extends northwards from Sarawak, dividing the state of Sabah. It is the location of the 4,095 meters, 13,435 feet high Mount Kinabalu, the tallest mountain in Malaysia. Mount Kinabalu is located in the Kinabalu National Park, which is protected as one of the 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Malaysia. The highest mountain ranges form the border between Malaysia and Indonesia. Sarawak contains the Mula Caves, the largest cave system in the world, in the Gunung Mulu National Park, which is also a World Heritage Site. The largest river in Malaysia is the Rajam. Around these two halves of Malaysia are numerous islands, the largest of which is Bangui. The local climate is equatorial and characterized by the annual southwest, April to October, and northeast, October to February, monsoons. The temperature is moderated by the presence of the surrounding oceans. Humidity is usually high, and the average annual rainfall is 250 centimeters, 98 in. The climates of the peninsula and the east differ, as the climate on the peninsula is directly affected by wind from the mainland as opposed to the more maritime weather of the east. Local climates can be divided into three regions: island, lowland, and coastal. Climate change will cause sea level rise and increased rainfall, increasing flood risks and leading to droughts. Malaysia signed the Rio Convention on Biological Diversity on June 12, 1993, and became a party to the convention on June 24, 1994. It has subsequently produced a National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, which was received by the convention on April 16, 1998. The country is megadiverse with a high number of species and high levels of endemism. It is estimated to contain 20% of the world's animal species. High levels of endemism are found on the diverse forests of Borneo's mountains, as species are isolated from each other by lowland forest. There are about 210 mammal species in the country. Over 620 species of birds have been recorded in peninsular Malaysia, with many endemic to the mountains there. A high number of endemic bird species are also found in Malaysian Borneo. 250 reptile species have been recorded in the country, with about 150 species of snakes and 80 species of lizards. There are about 150 species of frogs and thousands of insect species. The exclusive economic zone of Malaysia is 334,671 square kilometers, 129,217 square miles, and 1.5 times larger than its land area. It is mainly in the South China Sea. Some of its waters are in the Coral Triangle, a biodiversity hotspot. The waters around Sipadan Island are the most biodiverse in the world. Bordering East Malaysia, the Sulu Sea is a biodiversity hotspot, with around 600 coral species and 1,200 fish species. The unique biodiversity of Malaysian caves always attracts lovers of ecotourism from all over the world. Nearly 4,000 species of fungi, including lichen-forming species, have been recorded from Malaysia. Of the two fungal groups with the largest number of species in Malaysia, the Ascomycota and their asexual states have been surveyed in some habitats, decaying wood, marine and freshwater ecosystems, as parasites of some plants and as agents of biodegradation, but have not been or have been only poorly surveyed in other habitats, as in dobionts, in soils, on dung, as human and animal pathogens. The Basidiomycota are only partly surveyed, fungi, and mushrooms and toadstools have been studied, but Malaysian rust and smut fungi remain very poorly known. Without doubt, many more fungal species in Malaysia are yet to be recorded, and it is likely that many of those, when found, will be new to science. About 2/3 of Malaysia was covered in forest as of 2007, with some forests believed to be 130 million years old. The forests are dominated by dipterocarps. Lowland forest covers areas below 760 meters, 2,490 feet, and formerly East Malaysia was covered in such rainforest, which is supported by its hot wet climate. There are around 14,500 species of flowering plants and trees. Besides rainforests, there are over 1,425 square kilometers, 550 square miles of mangroves in Malaysia and a large amount of peat forest. At higher altitudes, oaks, chestnuts, and rhododendrons replace dipterocarps. There are an estimated 8,500 species of vascular plants in peninsular Malaysia, with another 15,000 in the east. The forests of East Malaysia are estimated to be the habitat of around 2,000 tree species and are one of the most biodiverse areas in the world, with 240 different species of trees every hectare. These forests host many members of the Rafflesia genus, the largest flowers in the world, with a maximum diameter of 1 meter, 3 feet 3 inches. Logging, along with cultivation practices, has devastated tree cover, causing severe environmental degradation in the country. Over 80% of Sarawak's rainforest has been logged. Floods in East Malaysia have been worsened by the loss of trees, and over 60% of the peninsula's forest have been cleared. With current rates of deforestation, mainly for the palm oil industry, the forests are predicted to be extinct by 2020. Deforestation is a major problem for animals, fungi, and plants, having caused species such as Begonia irisca to go extinct. Most remaining forest is found inside reserves and national parks. Habitat destruction has proved a threat for marine life. Illegal fishing is another major threat, with fishing methods such as dynamite fishing and poisoning depleting marine ecosystems. Leatherback turtle numbers have dropped 98% since the 1950s. Hunting has also been an issue for some animals, with overconsumption and the use of animal parts for profit endangering many animals, from marine life to tigers. Marine life is also detrimentally affected by uncontrolled tourism. The Malaysian government aims to balance economic growth with environmental protection, but has been accused of favoring big business over the environment. Some state governments are now trying to counter the environmental impact and pollution created by deforestation, and the federal government is trying to cut logging by 10% each year. A total of 28 national parks have been established, 23 in East Malaysia and 5 in the peninsula. Tourism has been limited in biodiverse areas such as Sipadan Island. Wildlife trafficking is a large issue, and the Malaysian government has held talks with the governments of Brunei and Indonesia to standardize anti-trafficking laws. Malaysia is a relatively open, state-oriented, and newly industrialized market economy. It has the world's 36th largest economy by nominal GDP and the 31st largest by PPP. In 2017, the large service sector contributed to 53.6% of total GDP, the industrial sector 37.6%, and the small agricultural sector roughly 8.8%. Malaysia has a low official unemployment rate of 3.9%. Its foreign exchange reserves are the world's 24th largest. It has a labor force of about 15 million, which is the world's 34th largest. Malaysia's large automotive industry ranks as the world's 22nd largest by production. Malaysia is the world's 23rd largest exporter and 25th largest importer. However, economic inequalities exist between different ethnic groups. The Chinese make up about 1/4 of the population, but account for 70% of the country's market capitalization. Chinese businesses in Malaysia are part of the larger Bamboo Network, a network of overseas Chinese businesses in the Southeast Asian market sharing common family and cultural ties. International trade, facilitated by the shipping route and adjacent Strait of Malacca, and manufacturing are the key sectors. Malaysia is an exporter of natural and agricultural resources, and petroleum is a major export. Malaysia has once been the largest producer of tin, rubber, and palm oil in the world. Manufacturing has a large influence in the country's economy, although Malaysia's economic structure has been moving away from it. Malaysia remains one of the world's largest producers of palm oil. Tourism is the third largest contributor to Malaysia's GDP after the manufacturing and commodities sectors. In 2019, the sector contributed about 15.9% to the total GDP. According to the World Tourism Organization, Malaysia was the 14th most visited country in the world and the 4th most visited country in Asia in 2019, with over 26.1 million visits. Malaysia was ranked 38th in the Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report 2019. Its international tourism receipts in 2019 amounted to $19.8 billion. The country has developed into a center of Islamic banking and has the highest numbers of female workers in that industry. Knowledge-based services are also expanding. In 2020, Malaysia exported high-tech products worth $92.1 billion, the second highest in the ASEAN after Singapore. Malaysia was ranked 36th in the Global Innovation Index in 2023 and 32nd in the Global Competitiveness Report in 2022.